Railroad Tycoon cheated an Apache scout, then his daughter fell in love with him. The boots were still warm when they brought them into town. Not from the sun, though the desert had baked the earth till it cracked like old pottery, but from the man who'd worn them. The Apache scout. The one they'd dragged through the dust by his hair, his legs dragging behind him like broken branches. They said he'd cursed the rails. Said he'd spat on the surveyor's map and called the iron serpent a thief of bones. They beat him for it. Then they took his boots. The Tycoon watched from the porch of his new office, white paint still fresh, windows unbroken, the scent of pine sawdust clinging to the air like a lie. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand, a ledger in the other. His daughter stood just inside the doorway, her fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe, knuckles white. She didn't speak. She never did anymore. They threw the boots onto the wooden steps like trash. One sole was split. The leather smelled of sweat, blood, and sagebrush. A single feather, blue jay, maybe, was tucked beneath the heel. Someone had tied it there with sinew. A prayer. A promise. Or maybe just a memory. No one picked them up. Not the foreman. Not the engineer. Not even the dog that sniffed at them once before trotting away, tail low. But that night, when the stars came out sharp as knife points and the wind whispered through the empty saloon windows, she slipped out. She wore no coat. No hat. Just her thin dress, soaked with dew by the time she reached the rail yard fence. The guard was drunk against the wall, snoring softly. The prisoner's cage was a crate lined with straw, half buried under sacks of grain. Inside, he lay curled on his side, breathing slow. His face was swollen. One eye closed. The other, dark, bright, alive, watched the sky. She didn't say a word. Just set down the loaf of bread, warm from the oven, still steaming faintly, and a canteen filled with water she'd stolen from the kitchen. She left it where the moonlight touched his chest. He didn't move. Didn't thank her. Didn't look at her. But when she turned to go, his voice came, not loud, not clear, but enough to make her freeze. Hazo. She didn't know what it meant. But something inside her cracked open like dry earth after rain. The next morning, the cage was empty. No sign of struggle. No blood on the ground. Just the boot prints leading away, smaller than a man's. Lighter. Like someone had carried them. And on the steps of the office, where the boots had been thrown, sat two pairs. His. And hers. She hadn't taken them back. She'd left them there. On purpose. Her father found them first. He didn't yell. Didn't curse. Just stood there, barefoot in the dust, staring at the boots like they were the last things left that remembered how to walk. That night, he dreamed of his own father. A quiet man. A farmer. A man who'd walked away from his family when the land turned to dust and the banks came calling. Who'd packed his boots, kissed his wife goodbye, and never looked back. The Tycoon woke with salt on his lips. Not from tears. From thirst. He hadn't cried since he buried his mother. But now, standing in the yard with his daughter's boots beside his own, he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Guilt. It didn't shout. It didn't burn. It just waited. Like dust in the throat. Like silence after a gunshot. And when the train whistle blew at dawn, long, low, mournful, he knew. The scout hadn't escaped. He'd been released. By her. And now, the land would remember. Because the boots didn't belong to the man who stole them. They belonged to the earth. And the earth always takes back what it gives. Somewhere beyond the ridge, coyotes began to howl. Not in hunger. In mourning. She didn't sleep after that. Not because she was afraid. But because the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It hummed. Like the wind through dry grass. Like the echo of a word spoken too softly to be heard, Hazo, but still felt in the bones. Every night, she brought bread. Sometimes warm from the oven. Sometimes stale, hardened at the edges. Once, she slipped in a pinch of salt wrapped in cloth, the last of her mother's, kept in a tin beneath her pillow. She didn't know if he ate it. Didn't know if he even saw her come. But she kept coming. He never spoke again. Never moved when she arrived. Just breathed. Slow. Deep. As if each breath were a prayer he'd learned long before the railroads came. One evening, rain fell, not the gentle kind that cools the skin, but the heavy, drumming kind that turned dust to mud and made the iron rails sing with dripping echoes. The guards huddled under the tarps near the cook fire, laughing over whiskey and cards, their voices swallowed by the storm. She slipped through the fence like smoke. The cage was half filled with water now. The straw soaked. He lay curled on his side, shivering. She knelt beside him. Didn't speak. Didn't touch. Just set down the loaf, this one shaped like a crescent moon, the way her grandmother used to make, and pulled off her moccasins. They were worn thin. Leather cracked at the heel. Soles stitched with sinew from a deer she'd seen die in the brush last autumn. Her feet were blistered, red, raw from walking barefoot across the yard every night. She placed them inside the crate. Next to his bare feet. He didn't move. But his breath caught. Just once. Then, he reached out. Not for the bread. Not for the shoes. His fingers, trembling, brushed the edge of her sleeve. A single touch. Light as a moth landing on stone. And then he closed his eyes. She didn't leave right away. Sat there until the rain slowed to a whisper. Until the fire died. Until the stars blinked back into the sky, cold and clear. When she finally stood, she looked down at him. His face was calm. For the first time, she saw not a prisoner. Not an enemy. But a boy. Maybe 17. Maybe 20. Eyes dark as river stones, cheeks hollow from hunger, lips cracked but still curved faintly, as if he'd smiled once, long ago, under a sky full of singing birds. She whispered something then. Something she hadn't said since her mother died. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer. But when she turned to go, she felt it. A warmth. On her wrist. He'd taken her hand. Held it. Just for 3 heartbeats. Then let go. She ran back to the house, barefoot, soaked, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The next morning, the boots were gone. Not the ones he wore. The ones she left. The guard found them folded neatly beside the crate. Inside, tucked where the sole met the arch, a single feather. Blue jay. Tied with sinew. Same as before. Only now, it was wet. Like someone had cried on it. That night, she didn't bring bread. She brought water. And a song. Her mother's lullaby. Soft. Broken. Off-key. She sang it standing just outside the fence, voice trembling like a candle in the wind. He didn't open his eyes. But his fingers twitched. And when the last note faded into the dark, he whispered back. Not in English. Not in Apache. In something older. Something that didn't need words. Just silence. And memory. And the quiet truth that some bonds aren't made by blood. They're made by hunger. By kindness. By the unbearable weight of being seen, when no one else dares to look. The locomotive roared like a dying god. Steel teeth biting into the earth. Smoke choking the sky. The track, fresh laid, still steaming in places, cut through sacred ground like a knife through flesh. They called it progress. She called it theft. Her father stood on the caboose, cigar clenched between his teeth, hat tipped back, chest puffed with pride. He'd spent 10 years building this line. 10 years of bribes, broken promises, and buried bones. Now, the last spike was driven. The final mile completed. The whistle would blow at noon, and the first train from San Francisco to Santa Fe would roll through. He didn't notice her standing on the tracks ahead. Didn't see her bare feet sinking into the wet earth where the rails met the desert. She wore no shoes. No bonnet. Just the coat he'd given her for Christmas 2 winters ago, the one she'd left by the cage. It hung loose on her frame now, too big. Too heavy. Behind her, the town buzzed like a hive disturbed. Men cheered. Women waved handkerchiefs. Children ran ahead of the wheels, laughing as if they were chasing something holy. But she knew what lay beneath the dirt. Buried altars. Ceremonial stones. A burial mound shaped like a bear's paw. Tawa had told her once, when he finally spoke, not in words, but in gestures, that this land remembered every step taken upon it. That the wind carried the voices of those who died here. That the earth wept when iron touched its skin. She knelt. Pressed her palm flat against the rail. Cold. Alive. Humming. Like it was waiting. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She didn't turn. Get up, her father growled. You'll be crushed. She whispered, he's coming. He laughed. A short, bitter sound. That savage. He's dead. Or worse, he's lost. And if he's not, then he's a ghost. And ghosts don't ride trains. She stood. Slowly. Looked him in the eye. For the first time in years, she saw something new in him. Not anger. Not pride. Fear. He looked away. The engineer blew the whistle. 3 long blasts. The train began to move. She stepped forward. Into the path of the engine. Her father screamed. Men shouted. Someone fired a pistol into the air. But she didn't flinch. The front wheel rolled toward her. 6 feet. 3. 1. And then, a shadow moved. From behind the ridge. Fast. Silent. Like smoke given legs. He came out of the dust like a spirit risen. Tawa. Barefoot. Hair wild with sage and dried blood. Clothes torn. Eyes blazing. In his hands, not a knife. Not a rifle. Just a single feather. Blue jay. Tied with sinew. He didn't run. Didn't shout. Just walked. Straight toward the train. The engineer slammed the brake lever. Steam exploded. The train shuddered, screeching, groaning, like a beast caught mid-roar. It stopped. 10 feet from her. Dust settled. Silence fell. Not the quiet of peace. The silence of a held breath. Every man on the platform froze. Every woman covered her mouth. Even the children stopped moving. Tawa stopped too. Stood there. Between the iron serpent and the girl. He looked at her. Not with love. Not with hate. With sorrow. Deeper than any wound. Then he turned. To her father. And spoke. Not in English. Not in Apache. But in the old tongue. The one that doesn't need translation. Because it lives in the bones. Her father staggered back. As if struck. His cigar dropped. Burnt out in the dust. He didn't understand the words. But he understood the weight. The grief. The truth. Tower raised his hand. Held up the feather. Let it go. It floated. On the breeze. Over the rails. Over the heads of the crowd. Over the silent graves beneath their feet. And landed, soft as a sigh, on the Tycoon's boot. He didn't pick it up. Didn't speak. Just stared at it. Like it was his own soul. Tower turned. Walked back into the dust. No one followed. No one dared. The train sat there. Steam still rising. Whistle cold. And the girl? She walked past it. Past her father. Past the men who'd built this empire on broken promises. She walked until the tracks ended. Until the desert swallowed them whole. And when she turned back one last time. He was gone. But the feather remained. On her father's shoe. And in her chest. A whisper. A warning. A promise. The train never left that day. They tried to restart it. Twice. Each time, the engine seized. The firebox choked. No one could explain it. Not the engineers. Not the priests. Not even the preacher who came later, clutching his Bible, muttering about curses. They say the locals took the locomotive apart piece by piece. Found nothing wrong. Just feathers. Dozens of them. Tucked inside the gears. Woven into the oil lines. Like someone had been praying into the machine. Long before it ever moved. That night, her father locked himself in his study. Didn't come out. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Just sat in the dark. Holding the feather. And crying. Not loud. Not soft. Just, forever. As if he'd finally remembered how. They called it a wedding. But no one danced. No one laughed. The church bells rang, 12 times, like tolling for the dead. She wore white. Not lace. Not silk. Just linen, hand-woven by her mother before the fever took her. The hem was frayed. The collar stitched with blue jay feathers, 7 of them, tied with sinew, just like the ones Tower left behind. She didn't wear gloves. Her hands were bare. Calloused. Scarred. From carrying water. From digging graves. From holding the hands of men who never woke up. Her father sat in the front pew. Dressed in his best suit, the one he wore to sign treaties and shake hands with politicians. His boots were polished. His beard trimmed. His eyes, hollow. He hadn't spoken to her since the train stopped. Didn't ask where she'd been. Didn't ask why she'd taken the coat. Didn't ask why she'd let the Apache walk free. He only watched. Like she was already gone. The groom arrived on time. A banker's son. Clean-shaven. Polite. Hands that had never held a rifle, never felt the burn of sun on skin, never known hunger beyond a missed meal. He smiled at her as she walked down the aisle. She didn't smile back. He offered his arm. She took it. Not out of love. Out of duty. Because her father had begged her to. Do this, he'd whispered the night before, voice cracked like dry bark. For me. For the family name. For God's sake, just say yes. She said yes. But not because she loved him. She said yes because she needed to leave. Needed to run far enough that the desert couldn't find her. That the wind wouldn't carry his name into her dreams. That the bread wouldn't keep appearing on her pillow, warm, fresh, wrapped in cloth, as if someone still remembered how to feed her. The minister began the vows. I, Eleanor, take thee, Thomas, her voice was steady. Too steady. Like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. Thomas repeated the words. Then came the part they always forgot to change. To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. She looked up. Past the stained glass. Past the candles flickering in the breeze. To the window. To the ridge. Where the dust still swirled. And there, just for a breath, she saw him. Tawa. Standing still. Wearing nothing but the coat she'd given him. His feet bare. His face painted with ash and clay. Not in war paint. In mourning. He raised his hand. Not in greeting. In farewell. And then, he turned. Walked into the wind. Gone. She didn't cry. Didn't gasp. Didn't speak. But when the minister asked, "Do you take this man?" she answered. Yes. The congregation exhaled. Someone clapped. A child giggled. The organ played sweetly. And then, she reached into the pocket of her dress. Took out the locket. Silver. Cold. Engraved with a single word in Apache script, Hazo. She slipped it onto Thomas's finger. Instead of the ring. He stared at it. Confused. Eleanor, what is this? She leaned close. Whispered so only he could hear, he gave it to me. So I wouldn't forget what mercy looks like. Then she turned. Walked out. Through the pews. Past the guests. Past her father, who rose slowly, face ashen, lips trembling. Outside, the sky was clear. No clouds. No birds. Just heat. And silence. She didn't look back. Just kept walking. Down the road. Past the saloon. Past the blacksmith's forge. Until the town vanished behind her. And the desert opened wide. She didn't know where she was going. Only that she had to go. Somewhere beyond the rails. Beyond the lies. Beyond the names they gave things to make them easier to kill. She walked until the sun sank low. Until her feet bled. Until the wind carried the scent of pine. And something else. Smoke. Cooking fire. And the faintest echo of a song. She stopped. Turned. There, beneath the mesquite tree, a man. Barefoot. Hair long. Eyes dark. Clothes patched with leather and prayer. He held out his hand. Not to take. Not to claim. Just to offer. A loaf of bread. Warm. Still steaming. And beside it, 2 pairs of boots. One small. One large. Both caked in dust. And between them, a single feather. Blue jay. Tied with sinew. She didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't run. Just stepped forward. Took the bread. Put it against her chest. Like a heartbeat. Then knelt. Took off her wedding dress. Folded it neatly. Laid it on the ground. Like a shroud. Then pulled on the boots. 1 foot. Then the other. They fit. Better than anything she'd ever worn. She stood. Looked at him. And finally, spoke. Not in English. Not in Apache. But in the only language left that mattered. Take me home. He didn't answer. Didn't nod. Didn't smile. Just turned. Walked into the dusk. And waited. For her to follow. Behind her, the town lights blinked out one by one. As if the earth itself had breathed, and chosen to forget them. Before dawn, the preacher found the dress. Still lying there. Beneath the tree. With a note pinned to the hem. Written in charcoal. Just 3 words, he taught me how to live. The Tycoon rode out alone. No horse. Just boots. And a rifle slung over his shoulder. He followed the tracks. Past the last station. Past the broken bridge. Past the place where the train wouldn't move. And there, he found the locket. On the ground. Open. Inside, a picture of a woman. Dark hair. Smiling. Eyes full of stars. Tawa's mother. And beneath it, a single line, written in faded ink, "This is what we lost." He fell to his knees. And wept. Not for his daughter. Not for his fortune. But for the boy he'd beaten. The land he'd stolen. And the soul he'd buried under iron and greed. He didn't go back. He stayed. Sat there. All night. Staring at the stars. Until the coyotes came. And sang with him. They found him at sunrise. Not by accident. By instinct. The desert remembers what men forget. His body lay curled beneath a lone cottonwood, its branches skeletal, stripped bare by wind and time. His face was turned to the sky, lips parted as if still whispering. His hands were folded over his chest, clutching the silver locket. The leather of his moccasins had cracked from thirst. His feet, bare, blistered, sunburnt, were half buried in sand, as if he'd tried to sink into the earth before it took him. No one knew how long he'd walked. 10 days. 20. No water. No food. No map. Just the coat she gave him. And the memory of her voice. They say the Apache elders came when the vultures circled low. Not to claim him. Not to bury him. But to honor him. They spoke no words. Only sang. A low, trembling song, one that rises from the throat like smoke from a dying fire. A song for those who chose love over tribe. Who walked away from safety to follow a girl's kindness. Who died not with a bullet in his back, but with a prayer on his tongue. They wrapped him in the coat. Laid the loaf beside him. Warm. Still whole. Fresh baked. As if someone had left it just hours before. No one in town admitted to baking it. No one claimed to have seen her. But every morning after that, for weeks. 4 months. For years, a loaf appeared. On the ridge. Where the rails ended. Where the dust swallowed the last echo of iron. Sometimes it was warm. Sometimes hard as stone. Once, it was covered in ash. Another time, threaded with wild sage. No one ever touched it. No one dared. The Tycoon came often. He didn't ride anymore. Walked slow now. Back bent. Eyes clouded with age and regret. He wore the boots she'd left him, his own pair buried under the porch where he'd thrown them the night Tawa vanished. He brought water. Brought tobacco. Brought silence. Sat beside the bread. Didn't speak. Didn't pray. Just sat. Like he was waiting. For forgiveness. Or maybe just for the wind to carry his name somewhere it might be remembered. One autumn, a storm rolled in. Rain came hard, first in sheets, then in thunderous drums, and the desert soaked up every drop like a thirsty child. When the clouds broke, the ridge was gone. Washed clean. The bread? Gone. The body? Gone. Even the cottonwood, the only landmark for miles, had split apart in the flood, roots torn free, trunks splintered into kindling. The townsfolk said he'd been taken. By spirits. By ancestors. By the land itself. But the girl? She never returned. Some said she married a trader in Sonora. Others swore they saw her walking the rail lines near Tucson, barefoot, singing lullabies to the wind. A few claimed, in hushed tones, that on quiet nights, when the moon hangs low and the coyotes hold their breath, you can still hear footsteps. Not behind you. Beside you. Light. Familiar. Like someone who's learned to walk without sound. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll find a loaf. Left on a rock. Wrapped in cloth. Smelling faintly of cornmeal and pine. And tucked inside, a single feather. Blue jay. Tied with sinew. Her father lived until he was 92. Never remarried. Never spoke of her again. But every morning, rain or shine, he walked to the ridge. Carried his own loaf. Set it down. Saturday. Waited. Until the sun kissed his bones. Then he'd rise. Turn. Walk home. And leave his boots on the porch. Every night. Same as always. When he died, they found his room untouched. Bed made. Candle lit. And on the windowsill, a small tin box. Inside, 7 blue jay feathers. 1 loaf of bread, dried to dust. And a letter. Written in shaky hand. I thought I built something that would outlive me. But all I built was a wall between my soul and the earth. She showed me what mercy looks like. And I spent the rest of my life trying to become worthy of it. If you're reading this, leave the bread. Let the wind take it. Let the desert remember. That's all we ever were. Just dust. And bread. And the courage to give it away. They buried him beside the ridge. No headstone. Just 2 pairs of boots. His. And hers. Years passed. The railroad rusted. The tracks faded. The town became a ghost. And still, every full moon, a loaf appears. No footprints. No signs. Just the scent of wheat. And the quiet certainty, that someone is still walking. Still watching. Still remembering. One winter, a boy, lost, starving, 12 years old, wandered onto the ridge. He was freezing. Hunger clawing at his ribs. He saw the bread. Stared at it. Trembled. Didn't touch it. Just whispered, "Is this for me?" The wind answered. Not with words. But with warmth. The loaf was soft. Still warm. He ate it slowly. Tears falling into the dust. When he finished, he looked up. And there, just beyond the rocks, a figure stood. Silent. Cloaked in shadow. Wearing boots. Wearing a coat. Wearing the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies. The boy didn't scream. Didn't run. Just bowed his head. And whispered, "Hazo." The figure didn't move. Didn't speak. But when the dawn came, the boots were gone. And so was the man. But on the rock, where the bread had been, a new loaf sat. And beside it, 2 more feathers. Blue jay. Tied with sinew. And written in charcoal, beneath them, "You're not alone." The boy carried the bread home. Fed his sister. Gave the feathers to his mother. She hung them above their door. Every night since, when the wind blows right, they sing. Not loud. Not proud. Just softly. Like a mother humming to her child. Like a father learning to forgive himself. Like a girl who loved an enemy. And changed the world with bread. And silence. And the courage to walk barefoot into the desert. Because some loves don't die. They become part of the land. And the land never forgets.